Now, please join me in welcoming our next panel of executives. Matt Rubel, board member, Hudson's Bay and HSNi. Brian Dodge, senior executive vice president, Retail Industry Leaders Association, and Gilbert Harrison, chairman of Financo. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here on this last day. We have a lot of interesting things to discuss this morning in view of what's happening with the economy and what the Trump administration is doing that will affect all of you. And we want to discuss some of the challenges and opportunities that are likely to arise. Let's start with you, Matt. One of the top issues facing the industry right now is corporate tax reform, specifically a provision known as the Border Adjustable Tax, BAT. Believe it or not, if you've read a lot of the dialogue on it, everybody thinks that this is something that President Trump has inaugurated, but in fact, it's something that Congressman Kevin Brady and Speaker Ryan have proposed themselves. And there's a lot of controversy and questions with respect to it. Matt, why don't you start and talk a little bit about your thoughts on it, and then we'll go to you, Brian.
Well, so I think one of the things that is really important to understand, and we know it at this conference more than anything, is that we're in the midst of tremendous disruption. And the change in the leadership within our government has certainly created more change than we could possibly plan for. But I think one of the things that we need to understand is where's the change coming from? And I think Gilbert said it very thoughtfully, which is that there is change coming from the White House. So we need to understand what's happening through USTR, TPP, and NAFTA and things like that. And then there is change that is happening through Congress, through a Republican leadership. And the BAT, which Brian will talk a little bit more in detail about, is actually happening through Congress. And if we think we've seen disruption through the change in the digital world and the traditional retail world, you don't have any idea what would happen to the U.S. economy in retail if this tax were to come forward. So it is something that we really need to understand. We need to end up articulating that very clearly to the leadership, of which Brian and other government groups have done, which will change that. And so, Brian, maybe you could amplify a little bit on what the BAT is, although it's very important to understand that's a congressional issue, not a White House issue.
I think before Brian starts, it's important to note that Brian is a leader in the Retail Industry Leaders Association, which represents some of the largest corporations in America. And as part of that, he and Senator Kennedy set up a meeting with the president. And why don't you talk a little bit about that and some of your thoughts?
Thank you for that. And I think it's a perfect segue. I know a number of the CEOs from our member companies who spoke to this conference over the last couple of days and have noted the concern that they have about the border adjustable tax. That is because the impact on the industry and ultimately on customers would be profound. And so as we talk about this, I want to disabuse you of the notion that this is a small threat or one that will quickly go away. It's a very, very real threat. And quite simply, it applies a 20% tax on all imported goods. So when you think about the clothes you're wearing, perhaps even the breakfast you ate this morning, generally those items or that food came from somewhere else. And so the impact on the businesses who would ultimately pay this tax is tremendous, and then the consumers who would pay prices at checkout in order to access these goods would go up as well. The overall effort to stop this, and Gilbert has alluded to it, is one that has really brought the industry together. Unlike any other issue that I've ever seen in my 10 years. The industry, big and small, all types of retailers recognize this as a profound threat. Retailers have long been strong advocates for corporate tax reform because they already pay among the highest effective tax rates of all industries. And if you've listened to the coverage on the border adjustable tax, the rate which they pay today of around 35, 36% would balloon to 70, 80, and north of 100% for some of these retailers. That's no messing around kind of numbers that would put these companies in jeopardy.
You want to repeat that again, Brian, because these numbers are scary.
They're shocking, right? So a number of retailers have spoken publicly about 75, 85% effective tax rate that wipes away your profit. And that is a serious concern for retailers. And so we've been able to engage at the highest levels of the retail businesses to get them to be a part of a broad education effort. I'll pause for a moment to give a little plug for a coalition that we're a part of with the National Retail Federation and about now 400 other businesses called Americans for Affordable Products. The website is keepamericaaffordable.com. You can learn more there. But as part of this broad education effort, we did have the opportunity to meet with President Trump and Vice President Pence in February to explain to him directly the impact that this have on the retail industry. I'll describe that meeting as a very productive meeting, and he was very thoughtful and inquisitive in that meeting. And thus far,
can you disclose the CEOs that were there?
There were 8 CEOs that have been widely reported. I'll certainly forget one, so I'll try not to list them all. But it was a very good meeting, and I think the objective of the meeting was to ensure that the president understood the difference between the border adjustable tax as proposed by Paul Ryan and others in the House and the comments that he's made about a border tax. And clearly he understands those differences. And I think it's incumbent upon all of you who may think that this is a terrible thing for your business to get engaged in this fight. Go to that website. Let us know you want to get involved, because education is critical to stopping this proposal.
What is the website that they should...
KeepAmericaAffordable.com.
Well, isn't part of the issue really that, I mean, we were talking about this earlier this morning, it's in the new change that's gone on, a bazooka has gone off when in fact we really need rifle shots into specific areas. So if the objective is to create jobs, and that is the objective, and to unencumber business, those are good objectives. However, how you execute those objectives seems to be muddied up in what is a more aggressive negotiating style of let's put everything on the table in order to end up with the change that we will all want. And so the instability that's being created in these initial days, whether it be through congressional action or whether it be through White House perspectives, all feeds back to let's create jobs and let's unencumber business. But it's not being articulated in a way that works for each industry. The good news is I think somebody in the White House owns some real estate that supports retail. So I think he understands that having empty tenants won't be good.
Fingers crossed. I think your point is...
And he sells or had sold a lot of products that were not made in America. Let me ask you this, both of you. If this gets passed, tell us the effect that you think it's going to have on the global stage and what your thoughts on potential retaliation by other countries.
We've already heard rumblings from foreign countries who've said that they would retaliate if this went into place. And I think if the roles were reversed and another country was doing it to our exports, we would retaliate as well. Just as recent as yesterday, when the president's nominee for U.S. Trade Representative was interviewed before a Senate panel, he talked about the likelihood of retaliation. I think that is part of the reason why you see net exporting industries who would, at least in theory, be beneficiaries of this, staying quiet. Agriculture is an industry that a lot of its growth potential is in the export market, and they've been silent on this largely because they know they'll be the tip of the spear when retaliation happens, which it will if this goes through.
And one of the scary things, I'm in the investment banking business, and just the other day I was working on a multi-billion-dollar acquisition that strategically made sense for both companies. But the CEO of the acquiring company said, there's no way I can go forward with this because if this tax goes through and there's a 15 to 18 or 20% increase in the price that I'm going to have to sell my products at, I may go bankrupt. So how can I spend the money buying something else? So this whole thing is a little bit scary. Matt, tell me a little bit about your thoughts on Made in America. The American manufacturing industry is going through some changes, but a lot of difficulties because however are we going to be able to increase this and talk about that. And also you were talking, Brian, yesterday with me about the fact that if the dollar were to go up, it makes it less expensive, but then our exports get ruined. So why don't you start, Matt, and then Brian just add on.
Listen, made in America ideally is a wonderful thing, but you have to, again, parse it out into categories and to where you can actually make something in America and continue to have the appropriate demand and the high quality. In the trend-related consumer products cut and sew business, which would be primarily apparel, footwear, and also in certain home products, you can't make it in America today at a cost that is commercial to the many. And so therefore, the democratization of goods to the American consumer that has happened over the past 35, 40 years since the opening up of free trade across the world has enabled people to consume. It's created 42 million jobs in retail. It has also enabled people to live better lives in consuming certain types of things. I sit on the White House Advisory Committee for Trade Policy, which is USTR. I've been on that for 6 years. And we worked very hard on TPP. TPP was an initiative which was a multilateral trade agreement across other Asian countries with other countries throughout the world that would have created an entity that would have enabled us to have options against China. That has been blown up here in the past few months. And the move, we had a meeting with our advisory committee telephonically with the new administration a couple of weeks ago, and the move is very clearly toward two initiatives. One is there will be no more multilateral trade agreements. The administration feels very clearly that you do not extract the best agreement from any one single country by doing a multilateral trade agreement. They believe that one-to-one negotiation extracts the best. We believe that that's short-sighted, and we believe that the integration of world trade is inevitable and that we need to embrace it. But there are industries where we can bring more production jobs back here, and we should do that. It's just not in the industries that foster the general cut and sew apparel business.
But that's probably a very important factor for the people here in the room, is that how do you get the people to be able to make the products that would be cost effective here in the United States? And is there the manufacturing capabilities available? A few years ago, we were asked by Oprah Winfrey to possibly establish a whole domestic linen and towel line in her name, as long as it was produced in the southern part of the United States and not overseas. And we searched high and low, and we cannot find any factories that would be able to produce any quality that was needed. And I think it's getting worse, not better, although there's a lot of talk about it. Let me change the subject here for a minute, guys. Repatriation. There's been a lot of talk about bills that are going to go through Congress, what the Secretary of Treasury is going to suggest in terms of a total tax bill, that there's trillions of dollars overseas and couldn't come back, that if so, in order to get the money back, there'd be somewhere between a 5 to 10% tax on this money that would go directly to fund the infrastructure. What are your guys' thoughts on this, and do you think it's feasible, and will it work?
Well, good. I'm very much for this. I've ran a business in 92 countries, and we found ways to redeploy that money outside of the United States, because if we kept the money outside the United States, we could use the cash much more effectively. So anything that will enable one to bring it back to the core marketplace should end up with more investment in the core of the businesses. And so it's something that's a very positive inflow of money that should end up happening, because there are great reservoirs that are out there that have taken away investment into the United States. Concurrently, if that money comes back and is at a very reduced tax rate, that tax will also be deployed toward the creation of jobs, and I think Brian has some insights into that.
Yeah, I would first say that, this is a great point about why we need to resolve the issue with the border adjustable tax, get it off the table so we can focus on the other key elements of tax reform that are clearly beneficial for the industry. We talked a moment ago of the Made America tax. I fundamentally believe that is a proxy, that term is sort of a proxy for job creation in the United States. Well, no industry does more job creation in the United States than the retail industry. There's 42 million jobs, as Matt mentioned a moment ago, that are supported by the retail industry. And so the more that we can do to ensure that the industry is able to invest, grow, service its customers well, the better off we'll be and the more jobs we'll be able to create.
But Brian, those 42 million jobs are more in direct-to-consumer in terms of stores and distribution, not in manufacturing. Do you have any numbers of how many people are actually involved in manufacturing of products that go into retail?
I can say that of the 42, 13 million of them are jobs that are outside of the retail industry that are heavily reliant on the industry, and a component of them are manufacturing. You're hitting me with a tough question for me to break that number up right now.
I can give you some numbers that 95% of the consumption of cut and sew products in the United States is imported product.
Yep.
So you can go 98% in footwear, you can go 94 or 93% in apparel, but in aggregate, that's what it is. So rebuilding that infrastructure with the pay rates that one would want, with the increase in what's happening with the minimum wage, it would create and move goods out of range of at least 50% of the consumers in the United States.
Is the technology there to build factories that perhaps are run automatically with robots and maybe not as much jobs, so that individuals, so that the manufacturing could be done at a cost-effective basis?
You can't sew a shoe that way.
Thank you. I knew that was the answer. Let me go to another interesting question that affects everybody here. And that's as retailers continue to expand and take a look at what their security problems are and their portfolios. You got hackers, you got nation states getting smarter, going into and hacking all sorts of information. When you're both on your industry associations, can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing about this, some of the wins and challenges facing retailers in the whole area of cybersecurity? How will public policy help or hamper retail as you deal with this important challenge, which is something that is critical to all of us?
Sure. Obviously, we had a rough go of it a few years ago, but the retail industry has done a tremendous amount of work over the course of the last 3 years to advance their practices, but also to really work together. In 2014, the retail industry established the Retail Information Sharing Center, RSISC, where businesses can come together and share information about threats that they're facing and work together to defeat them. We've also worked together on public policy solutions to ensure that government is able to interact with those sharing centers so that we can get information from government to government. And the next step in the process is really getting ourselves to a point where the federal government has given us a real pathway for understanding their expectations around data security and data breach notification laws. Right now we operate in a patchwork of laws around the country, which is not good for consumers and it's not good for businesses, and we're making great progress there. I'll make a short plug for, I know we announced this earlier this week, but a partnership with Accenture around RTech, and it's another place where retailers can come together to talk about innovation in a variety of spaces, but I think key is ensuring that we're working together in a variety of ways and focused on these key threats, including cybersecurity.
And so how much of this is coming from the Russians?
Well, I'm originally Russian, Gilbert, so it's not me, but way back.
But that's way back.
I get my 20-year-old kid to do it.
I mean, Putin's not one of your best friends, I don't think.
Yeah, no, I keep my shirt on. But thank God you don't want to see that. But anyway, so, sitting on boards.
At least we got one applause out of this
yeah.
session.
Later I'll take it off. And it is Vegas,
You
right?
don't want to really see it.
It's Vegas, so anything goes. So, no, but if you really think about the work of governing a board, right? This is tremendously difficult. So audit committees are trying to, work with management and management teams on understanding cybersecurity and how to do it. And I would say that we're up and running, and we're trying to get an understanding of this, but it is a huge issue. There is something at every board meeting on every company that I'm coming up with where we're now going over, how many times somebody tried to breach, how far did they get in, and for those of you who are in the industry, you understand it. It's really just good old-fashioned somebody making it through door 1 to door 2 to door 3 and hanging out until they can go and bring the goods back through. And so there are a lot of industry groups that are doing this, but the amount of money and the amount of time and the amount of understanding that we have to put behind this in order to make our data safe and private is tremendous, and I think we're only in the second inning of being able to really understand how to address it. So huge opportunity for people to bring more ideas to the companies and to the government on how to do that effectively.
Thank you. I think that we could go on for another hour, but the clock is telling us we have 1 seconds left. But I hope that everybody here has understood a little bit about some of the problems facing us with the new administration, and hopefully things are going to get better, and industry is going to get better, and all of you that are in retail will find out that your products are selling, and your customers are happy, and your shareholders are happy. Brian and Matt, thank you very much, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you.